The U.S. Women's National Team's summer soccer is over. Who stood out, who might have a little bit more work to do, and why it's nice to see them winning games while also figuring out what the ends of the player pool look like for this team. This is this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Thursday, July 3rd. We just watched 3 wonderful games from the U.S. Women's National Team, and we're going to dig into some of the performers I think will be getting additional looks, who impressed, who maybe faded into the background, and why there's a lot to like if you're a U.S. Women's National Team fan right now. Let's jump in. So the U.S. Women's National Team finished their 3-game friendly series last night, 3-game international window, nice long window before the big break until October, and it went very well by all standards and estimations. I think we have to call this one a success. 2 4-0 wins over Ireland, capped off by a surprisingly dominant performance against Canada, 3-0, 11 goals scored, 0 conceded, closing the camp out with, again, a domination of the regional rival. Have to feel very good about what we've seen from the U.S. Women's National Team, even as they continue this sort of era of tinkering and experimentation and bringing players in who are a little bit new to the environment. Feels very good that they're able to maintain that consistency while seeing a lot of new faces. So I'm not going to go into, every line by line detail of all 3 of these games, but I just want to break down the people who stood out to me, the goods, the bads, the in-betweens. There's not going to be too many bads because, like I said, this was an incredibly positive experience, I think, for everyone in this camp. But we are getting some final looks here before things get serious in October. I think we saw Emma Hayes. We always talk about the big decisions at the end of this year after looking at a lot of different players. Feels like she maybe kind of punted that to the fall by making that choice to leave the European-based players home during this camp, which is great. We saw a lot of these NWSL-based players step up and really impress and look like they're ready to play their guts out for the crest, and that's exactly what you want to see. But now we are in this space of she's going to watch these players go back to their clubs, see how they're performing there. And then I do think big decision time in terms of what the group is going to be going into qualifying in 2026 is going to look like later in this fall in 2025. So let's talk about standouts. Let's talk about players that I think have to be leaving this camp feeling very good. And I'm going to start with kind of a bigger name, I guess. This is a player that maybe doesn't get enough specific love on this podcast just because I've always been a fan and I always just assume that she's going to be there and be in the mix. I'm a big fan of this player since long before the late sub even began, and that's Lynn Biondolo. I think it's time we talk a little bit about Lynn. She doesn't always get, again, sort of the spotlight. She's a fan favorite. She's a player that's sort of in and out of these teams. I've been a believer in Lynn Biondolo for a very long time, and I do believe that the longer she's been on the team, the more effective she's become, strong veteran presence that can make an impact both as a starter and off the bench, and she finishes runs that not everyone is finishing, especially when the U.S. holds the lion's share of the possession. So this is a player, like I said, everyone knows her well. She's been in and out of the team for a number of years, but as we know, when push comes to shove, not always a lock for the U.S. Women's National Team. She was the expanded member for Tokyo when they expanded the Olympic rosters. She makes the 2023 World Cup. Vlatko Andonovski always really liked Lynn. She's an alternate turned full rostered member in 2024. Just last year, right? She wasn't part of that core 18 going to Paris, but she does make it onto that team, is a great contributor to that team that wins gold. She is a player that you always know that a coach loves to have in camp. But what we saw in this particular camp is why I think even at the age, it's going to be 34 in 2027, I think she is still a really good player to keep in that arsenal of veterans who can be a rock for a young team and still contribute, even if, again, we are maybe moving into the last cycle of her career, especially if, God forbid, not all of Triple Espresso end up available in 2027. So Lynn Biondolo started the second game against Ireland and the game against Canada, which to me felt like a reward for some of the highest performers of camp. It ended up kind of being a moot point because of how much the U.S. dominated, but I do think that Hayes really wanted to win this game against Canada and wanted to put the best team out there and took that very seriously. It sounds like behind the scenes, they had a lot of really good conversations about what it means to play for this team, to wear this crest, to represent in a game against Canada, even if it is friendly. And Biandolo is a player that has been mentioned by Hayes multiple times in multiple camps about that leadership structure. I think we obviously know who some of the other players are there, right? There's Naomi Girma, who wore the armband during this camp. There's Sam Coffey, who wore the armband during this camp. There's now Biandolo, who also wore the armband for the first time in her career, very well deserved in this camp. And so she understands the leadership structure. And I think that she does just enough on the pitch to also keep herself in this consideration. Biandolo is always asked to do slightly different things. I think it's part of the reason why coaches love her so much. She can play on the wing. She can play center forward. She's very comfortable coming off the bench. She's a huge spark off the bench if that's the best role for her. She can start with a bunch of youngsters. She's very good at that kind of new dynamic where suddenly you're a veteran of this team and you are a player with the most experience. You can handle that level of versatility and trust. I will say, the flip side is the same Lynn Biandolo that we've seen for a number of years, which is why I think it's always hard for coaches also to make her a lock, which is like she missed some sitters against Canada, right? There were a couple of when they were playing on the counterattack, which is not always my favorite role for this team anyway, but she missed a couple sitters. There was one that she should have passed to Rose Lavelle. That is also the Lynn Biandolo experience. There are going to be a few that she leaves on the pitch and she doesn't quite sink and she's not quite that killer in front of goal, but everything else that she creates outweighs, I think, those missed shots. And I also just think that all of those positives outweigh the negatives. And I truly believe, not unlike a player like Rose Lavelle, but if Lynn Biandolo can make it to 2027 healthy, I think that's a very, very difficult player to leave home. I think she could be one of those kind of super subs, doesn't need to be the main focal point, doesn't need to be the A1 option every single time, but she's an incredible team player. And we saw during this camp what exactly she can do on the field while being a very anchoring presence off of it. So I just thought this was a really, really great camp for Lynn Biandolo. I think it's a good reminder of the legacy that she will leave with this team when she is done wearing the crest. But now let's talk about some players who got maybe first time or second time, third time opportunities and are continuing to really show out and impress. I think we have to talk about the outside backs. The OB job is open. Hayes has pretty much said as much, right? She feels really good about Emily Fox, as we all do. But I think everybody else, it's kind of in flux. I think we're going to see a number of players. I think Crystal Dunn will be another one when she comes back, European players out during this window. But this job is open. And I think we're starting to see some young players walk through that door. I think we have to talk about Lily Reel. Shout out to the first timer. She got 2 starts in her first camp, which is pretty incredible all in of its own. A very assured performance against Ireland in the first game. Thought she played really well against Canada in the second game. She was actually asked to stay home more than Avery Patterson on the other side, and we'll talk about Patterson in a second too. I think she did a nice job with that. I think sometimes that's the harder job. As we know, there are a lot of American outside backs who are very good at pushing into the attack and kind of playing win back and moving into spaces and sending crosses. And there's a long legacy of that. And we've seen that from a lot of players who ultimately did not stay on this team for super long. But Reel was asked to stay home a little bit more. And that in and of itself, I think, is an impressive testament to what Hayes thinks she can do in defensive transition. And she got into the attack. We saw a couple really incredible passes from Lily Reel. She basically had, I don't know if she was actually credited with the assist, but the ball that she had to spring Alyssa Thompson forward at the end of that first Ireland game. We saw Alyssa Thompson do incredible things with that, but that was a wonderfully weighted pass forward to spring Thompson that Thompson turned into a goal. I think that's a really good example of the kind of possession-based football that Hayes wants these players to play. That should have been a clearance. And maybe for a different player, that pass would have been a clearance. But for Reel, it was this beautifully placed ball that, again, got Thompson in on the run. It kept the ball in play. It kept it in the U.S.'s possession. So impressed by her ability to be very thoughtful in the attack. It's not just springing crosses in. It's not crosses in the air. It's not just clearances. She had a couple of interplays with Thompson in the Canada game too. Not all of them kind of, got pulled off, but she's going to get additional looks with the team, I think, because we're already seeing that level of trust on the defensive side. And again, she's such a sophisticated passer already, even beyond what we consider an inverted wingback or what we consider an outside back to be for the U.S. women's national team, sort of that archetype of kind of like whipping crosses in. I think she's even better than that. And that is a kind of player that Hayes is going to want to get as much experience as possible going into qualifying next year. But let's talk about Avery Patterson on the other side. Now, Patterson had a little bit of a flashier camp, right? She gets a goal. She was known for springing play. Canada in particular was giving her loads of space on the right side in the first half of that Canada game. The midfield switches work really well. I think it's useful to see that the midfield knows that she's going to be out there. She's going to be making that run. There's a lot of trust in the midfield when they're trying to switch the run of play. I give her kind of like a spiritual assist against Canada. That first goal that Sam Coffey scored, we know she was in the right place in the right time. If Coffey hadn't gotten to it, we know Patterson would have. Very good on the ball, a lot of tenacity. I think, my only question for Patterson is on the defensive end, and that is not her fault. I think that is just what the other teams gave her. She was able to push forward a lot. She was able to run into space a lot. She was able to know that she had Michelle Cooper on her side. Cooper is really, really good in defensive transition. She works her butt off to get back and help defense. I think that Patterson leaned on that a little bit, but that's great against these opponents. I would like to see her against teams that are maybe going to make her run back a little bit more, try to pin her back a little bit more, get into space behind her a little bit more to see what that in particular looks like. But I think everything else that we saw from Patterson was incredibly positive, and we just have to wait until she gets that test and see what happens. So really impressed by some of these young OBs. People might have seen that Giselle Thompson and Carrie Abello had to leave camp with some light injuries. Too bad we didn't get to see more of them. But I think that Hayes has to be leaving this window feeling very, very good about where that position is going, because as we discussed, that has not always been a position of strength, but it's starting to really feel like one. Now, so many good things happen in this camp. The rest of it's going to be pretty short, pretty rapid fire, because there are a lot of different names I want to shout out, little impressions that we saw, players that I thought played really well, because we could go on and on and on and on about the good stuff, right? So we have to mention Rose Lavelle. Won't go long on this because I talked about her a lot in the last episode that we did on the US. She pretty much brought everything that I thought she was going to bring, brought her whole bag against these teams. The nutmegs were back. The set pieces were back. I thought she did a nice job kind of helping Coffey and whoever their third midfield partner was in stopping the other team from kind of switching the point of possession. And I think we also have to shout out the fact that the set pieces in particular with Lavelle back looked so much better. So much better. We got multiple goals off of set pieces from the United States in this window. This has been a struggle for them. And I think it's maybe just a good testament to the idea that, yes, set piece design and the tactics are all really important, but sometimes it's just about having the skill and the chemistry with your running players to pull those things off. So I think they have to feel very good about the set pieces that Lavelle brings. I think they have to feel very good about how she was on the ball. She was really able to dig in, I think, physically, which is always maybe a little bit of the main concern with Lavelle because of some of her injury issues. Really loved what we saw from her. I stand by what I said when she was named to the roster, which is that if Rose Lavelle is healthy, she needs to be on a major tournament roster in 2027. Alyssa Thompson, what else can I say? She had this moment, right, in one of the Ireland games where it looked like, again, talking about legacy, I think Hayes really hit that home with these young players in this camp, where it felt like she was possessed by just like every left winger from the U.S. women's national team before her. It was like she takes that ball. It is that ball that Real sent up to her. She takes that ball. It's like Megan Rapinoe, Tobin Heath, Kristen Press, Mel Swanson, just like all of them entered her id, and she did that cut into the right foot, sends a beautiful ball into the back of the net. The year of Thompson continues. You can see the work that she has been doing. You can see who she's been doing it with. Kristen Press is obviously her club teammate, and I am just so excited to see how she fits in to what is already a really, really talented winger role with the United States. I think it's just so hard to be a forward for the U.S. There's so much talent there. But yeah, that particular move, the one where the inverted, switch, you're on the left side, you switch to the right foot, you drag, you drag your defenders in on the box, and then you send it home in the air. That is some good stuff. That is what you want to see from the U.S. Women's National Team's left winger. And you have seen, and again, you get chills because you're like, oh, I've seen so many legendary U.S. players do that exact same thing. And Thompson is pulling that off now with basically at will. And so very excited to see that from her. Want to shout out Claudia Dickey, who got 2 starts with the U.S. in goal. She didn't have a lot to do in her first Ireland game, but I thought within the Canada game where things got very, very direct, you're playing a Casey Stoney team, things are going to get direct. Very decisive off her line. Had a really lovely double save in the first half that kept the U.S. ahead 1-0. It was, again, a very direct game. It felt sometimes like the ball was in the air and just kind of like going from goalkeeper to goalkeeper. I think if you're in that kind of a duel with Caitlin Sheridan, you want to come out on top, and I really think that Dickey did. Felt very, very good about that. I don't think there was anything that we saw in these camps that necessarily moved someone ahead of a player like Valentella's Joyce. But when the big moment comes, you want to show up. And I do think that clean sheet against Canada is a real testament to some calm nerves from Claudia Dickey. So shout out to her. I think she has to feel great about how that went. Michelle Cooper has already gotten a shout out from me. An incredible pass first option on the right side. She's athletic. She's a good defender from the attacking position. There are some bailout moments in this window. It wasn't all perfect. The team did lose possession sometimes. They were off the pace sometimes. Michelle Cooper was there almost every single time to get back and bail somebody out. That is an incredible Swiss Army knife of a player. She's not a huge finisher for the United States just yet. I think that's fine. I think when you have a player like Thompson on the left, player like Rose Lavelle in your midfield, or Lynn Biandolo, or anybody else that you want on that pitch, Michelle Cooper is the facilitator. She is like the person who does a little bit of everything to keep everything ticking, keep everything moving smoothly. And I thought she had another really, really good camp. She stands out because she's so smart about what it means to be a full style footballer. And I think having the maturity to do that from the attacking line when maybe you just want to be go, nose to goal 100% of the time, very impressive. And again, it makes her really hard to drop. Very impressed by Michelle Cooper. Sam Coffey is a scoring machine now. How about that? She keeps shooting the ball and it keeps going into the goal. Wonderful. I loved actually the Canada game because the Canada game kind of perplexed me. I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know why they gave the U.S. so much space. I don't know why they let Sam Coffey dribble into the box all the time. I don't know, but I love that Coffey, when given that space, is taking it and is shooting it. I think that's wonderful. I think that's not going to always be her role against top competition, but she scores off a set piece. Like, I think that those things are good where you have to feel great knowing that your defensive midfielder has enough technical skill putting her laces through it, that when you do have those cleanup balls, if you're recycling the ball off of a set piece, that you're going to hit pay dirt. And I just think that's wonderful to see from Coffey. Always also has been very cool. I think I mentioned this up top talking about Biandolo, seeing her step into a leadership role. Sam Coffey is always a player that you want on your team for that very reason. And while I always have maybe my little quibbles about some of the ways that she's utilized in the defensive midfielder position, I think that she stepped forward in a really wonderful way as a leader in this camp. And it's kind of remarkable to think that, she went from not even making the World Cup team in 2023 to being so integral. And you can tell that Hayes loves working with her. So just great to see from Coffey, and I love that she bagged a couple goals. And then I also want to shout out the youngster Claire Hutton. Slightly mixed praise, maybe. I thought that she actually was having a little bit of trouble with some of the physicality in the Canada game early. You don't know what it feels like to play Canada till you've played Canada. Like, you just can't really have that like in your body until you've done it. I thought that Hutton grew into that game beautifully. As we know, she got a rising header goal, which is, again, just like all guts, all glory. Love to see that. I thought that even when she wasn't always sure she was going to get calls in the midfield, I thought she really put her body on the line. There's a lot to like about this kid. And I think walking away from that Canada game, which, like, again, it was a weird performance from them, but also that is top 10 competition. I think you have to say, yeah, this player is not going back down, I think, to the U23s, or she might play for the U20s, just to get more international experience. But I think this is a player for now. And I think they have to think that her, maybe Lily Johannes, like this really nice young group, is going to be able to carry the banner, not only just for 2027, but beyond. So felt very, very good about what we saw from Hutton. You love to see a player grow into a game like that. And then the last one, and I've mentioned this throughout, the team just seems like they're in a really good place. I just shouted out mentality. You can't pick opponents, and I'm going to talk about this in a second. I just don't think that the U.S. has been challenged very much, and that's not really a diss on the other teams. They have their own goals out of these games, but I think that we have seen when you're going to bring in players who are on the bubble, NWSL players who don't know if they're ever going to get called into another national team camp, what you want to see is that commitment. You want to see them take this really, really seriously. You want them to believe that they can take a spot here through commitment to the team itself. And those are the players that, when called upon, will show up and give you everything. And I just think Hayes has done a really good job of cultivating that environment while also keeping it fun. It looks like it's fun to play for this team right now. And as we know, that has not always been true over the last 5 years. So I think this is Emma Hayes' superpower, honestly. Like, I really just think that as a personality manager, she is very, very good at holding the highest possible standard. You read some of her quotes and they're harsh. She says things like, You might be a starter on a different national team, but you're not necessarily going to be on this one. This is the hardest team to make. You have to keep showing up. You have to be doing the work. You have to want to be the best of the best of the best to make this team. But she's doing it in a way that players are responding to because winning is fun. And that was really nice to see. So we're going to do a little bit of a shorter thing about some of the stuff that I didn't like so much. A lot of good stuff. I mentioned opponents. I'm not bashing Ireland and Canada here, though. Again, I found the Canada performance really worrisome, and I think Casey Stoney after that game also felt like that was very worrisome. But the tests just weren't quite as extensive as they could have been. We saw a lot of the attack. We didn't see a lot on the goalkeepers. Like I said, I thought Dickey did wonderfully with the moments that she had. Not a lot of tape again on the outside backs, recovery and transition. I think Ireland, it's just, they have bigger fish to fry. They did not make the Euros. They are in a long process of trying to qualify for the next World Cup. They just have other things that they're trying to work out. And I actually liked for a while they were doing kind of the high press, but they also did not bring their best players to this camp. They did not play their best players in these games. And so we just have some unfinished questions, I think, on the US side because of some of the other goals of the plays of the teams that they were playing, which all respect. I'm not going to sit here and complain about that, but I think we have to acknowledge it as a reality. I didn't love the counterattacking finishing. I mentioned that with Lynn Biondolo. It's a hard way to live. I haven't missed it. I don't like always when the U.S. sits back and plays counterattacking football. I think you have to rely on a lot of moments of individual brilliance. I think you have to rely on kind of these do or die moments before you know you're going to be on pressure again. They'd rely on balls in behind against Canada early on Wednesday. Got into danger spaces multiple times without really punching it in. They did generate the goals off of set pieces, which means that those counterattacking motions were being rewarded in the grand scheme. But, you just get flashbacks watching the team waste chances on the counterattack. And so I don't know if this is a huge quibble, but it's just like, it's an unsettling feeling to watch after, again, the Vladko Andonovsky years. You always just want them to sink those things and put themselves in a comfortable place. And you just don't want the attack to feel like it's wasteful, but also that I don't think is the overarching story of this window at all. I do think possession was a little bit sloppy against Canada and a little bit sloppy at time against Ireland. I'm going against the stats here. These are eye tests. I'm really nitpicking here. Individual passes that went awry. No one individual culprit. I think it was passed around. I think Hutton had a really big learning experience in the midfield, especially in the first 30 minutes. I think she was a little bit light to give the ball away. Michelle Cooper got caught not looking for the ball at times. Lily Reel had one, I think, really troubling back pass. I think Dickey got hung out to dry a few times. I think that's why you're happy to have Naomi Girma on your team, because she cleans up so much. I think there were so many little fires that she put out, even in that Canada game. I don't think that Canada really got the separation that they needed because she was on the pitch. And so they can play with fire on a physical day. But I am just like, man, every little one, you're like, oh, against a better team, against a better team, against a better team. So I do think that we saw maybe not chemistry moments, but just learning experiences in that midfield and in that defense where things were not always perfect. Some of the giveaways were kind of bad, but you're just happy to see that they make the recovery runs and you've got a player like Girma to keep everything, really comfy for the back line. And Hayes credited her veterans for that specifically. I think she said something to the idea that she really appreciated that her veteran players, and I think you have to look at Girma, Coffey, Biondolo, Lavelle. Canada came in wanting to play a particular type of game. The U.S. didn't really let them, and it was very obvious to see how Canada kind of deflated throughout that first half. So even the negatives have a little bit of a positive to them, but I do just think that you have to look at, even Hutton said it at halftime, even in a great performance, it was a little bit sloppy sometimes in the midfield. People were not anticipating actions the way maybe they were against a team like Ireland, or even going back to the last camp where they had the lion's share of the possession. And it's not bad to have those learning experiences in a more transitional game, because you might end up in one of those when you're playing, a top 5 European opponent in the next World Cup. So talking player pool, all of those players above, I really do think are going to get additional looks. Those are all players that I think did enough to get more time in training camp. So, but who maybe see again. I'm going to quote Hayes here. There were a couple of players that she quoted kind of in a hypothetical, but I think we got to sort of take note. She said, whether you're Izzy Rodriguez, Sam Meza, or Jordan Bugg, she says, I don't know whether they're going to be called in again, but I know that they understand what it takes, and it will give them the ambition and the appetite to be here. She was just speaking in a hypothetical of sending these players back to their camps after getting this opportunity and wanting them to feel like they have that to work towards. But those 3 players, they did get a shout out as where she's not sure if those are the players necessarily for right now. Angelina Anderson is a player that kind of, fluctuates between the U23s and the senior team. I do think she is maybe on the horizon for something like that 3rd goalkeeper spot, but we're not seeing her necessarily stand out in terms of getting a ton of time. I'm curious about Emily Sands and Tara Mickione. Emily Sonnet played center back on Wednesday against Canada, which again, I feel like, that's another leader I should point out. Sonnet, she's like the quiet killer. Sonnet was very, very good. I thought she was actually great in that game. It's so funny. I sometimes forget, but like Sonnet was also very good. But again, that's like my thing is I watch Emily Sonnet play and I go, yes, that's Emily Sonnet. That's how she plays football. You want her on the pitch against Canada. Nothing against that. But again, we're just not seeing as many center back combinations with Girma. I am so curious what Hayes' mindset is there in terms of what she thinks is going to be happening in October and beyond. We did not see a lot of Olivia Moultrie. She started the second game against Canada, but it did still kind of feel like Hayes had her sort of preferred A team, even with this being a very stretched roster far beyond probably her first choice starters. And I don't know what that says about the players who were in between and didn't really get that much of a chance to make an impact. Or, frankly, maybe when given the chance, didn't kind of stamp their place the way some of these other players did. I don't think things are completely over for anybody. I do think club form is going to be very important. I think you're going to see NWSL players continue to try to excel at their clubs. I think you're going to see these European-based players come back in with their clubs. They're going to be wanting to perform well in the early fall. But I'm curious what mix we're going to see when this gets very serious, because I think this was the last, it's all fun and games. Let's take this seriously, but let's go have fun out there. I think World Cup qualifying is going to be a very big deal for this team. I think they're going to want to finish first. I think they always want to finish first. And the end of the year, as we know, is always a great time to test what that looks like against the best of the best. But it feels good to be seeing this experimentation and also seeing the team win. Shout out to Hayes for what she's cultivated in terms of her culture. It's very impressive and not, as it turns out, personnel dependent, which I think is also pretty incredible considering where maybe the player pool was, again, 2-3 years ago. So the U.S. is off until October. We still have a lot of other nice international stuff going on. We still got Euros, we got WAFCON, we got, Copa America. But shout out to the U.S. I thought this was a really nice camp, and I cannot wait to see which players get put together in the fall. The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.